Just get to a few specifics now, if you wouldn't mind, from people. Zoe here from Burhamtown, she's wanting to know if it's safe to move my horse into an area where there is a flying fox nursery, and we've spoken about the precautions, but she said, is it safe for him to graze in a paddock where flying foxes are?
Generally, I think flying foxes are everywhere almost. So the answer to that, I think, is yes. The precautions are where the flying foxes may be gathering around flowering trees or fruiting trees, but also it is about making sure that your feed and water are covered so that any droppings don't go into that feed and water. But I don't think we should be frightened with flying foxes. They're part of our environment. We live with them. Horses have lived with them for a while as well. So I wouldn't think there'd be any major risks. Yeah.
Could I add to that, Sharon? Thanks. Look, in some of our research that we've done, we've looked at trying to understand what the level of contamination, if you like, urine, faeces and food debris associated with feeding flying foxes is in relation to trees, and it seems quite clear that it stops effectively at the drip line of the tree. So if flying foxes are feeding in a fig tree, the urine, the faeces, the fruit debris effectively falls underneath that tree, and there is little, if anything, in the rest of the paddock. Certainly if there's just pasture. The only time where we see a low level of additional debris might be if they take fruit from the tree with the fruit on it and go and eat it in another tree a little way away. But it's primarily that tree that's being fed in that poses the primary risk, and if horses are excluded from that area, that will be effective.
Another question from Robin at Casino. She wants to know what effect is expected on Hendra infections with the weather warming up. Are pasture-only fed horses in heavily treed environments more susceptible to the virus?
Yeah, look, this goes to why we had such a remarkable event this year, and Rick and Michael talked about it at the beginning, where we had 17 events in this year, and in the previous 16 or 17 years we've only had 14 events. And there are two things we know about what happened differently, or what was different this year, and that's basically that more flying foxes were excreting virus, and they were excreting virus for longer than what we believed that they could excrete virus on the basis of experimental studies, etc. What we don't know is why more flying foxes were excreting virus this year and why they were excreting it for longer. Now, there are a number of hypotheses, and finding that out, the whys, is a primary focus of the accelerated research funding from the task force. But there are a number of plausible hypotheses about why that might have been, and certainly they relate to the extreme weather events for the last couple of years that have impacted nomadic movements of flying foxes, impacted feeding behaviour, and food availability in general. Another one of them is the climatic changes. Was it that the cooler, milder, damper weather allowed the virus just to survive that little bit longer and so increase the opportunity for horses to become infected? Another one of the hypotheses is that is there a change in species composition? And this is certainly, and in fact this goes back to a question that you asked earlier about why Queensland and New South Wales and not Victoria. Previously, the 13 of the 14 events had been in Queensland. This year we saw almost an equal number in Queensland and New South Wales. One of the things that's happening is that there has been, over the last decade or more, an increasing number of black flying foxes in New South Wales. And one of the hypotheses is that this changing species composition might be part of the reason why there were more cases this year and more in New South Wales. So really there are a number of factors, and the climate thing is one of them that may or may not be associated. These are hypotheses, they need to be tested, we need to explore the relationships. One thing is for sure, I think, that it's going to be a multi-causal thing. There are going to be a number of factors that will come together to make the kind of year that we saw this year, this exceptional year, hopefully a rare event.